Hi, I'm Andrew Ledbetter from Texas Christian University, and today I'm talking to Dr. Mark Orbe, who is the creator of co-cultural theory. So Mark, how would you summarize co-cultural theory for us?
Well, I think the best way to summarize it is a theoretical framework that allows insight into how those people who are traditionally marginalized in a society communicate.
Okay, and just in terms of marginalized people, how did you become initially interested in studying the communication behavior of marginalized groups?
Well, I think all of us at some points in our lives experience marginalization. My particular interest started in graduate school as I left the upper Northeast and traveled to the Midwest, the rolling hills of Athens, Ohio. And being a product of a multiracial marriage and being from a lower socioeconomic background, when I started graduate school, really felt like an outsider. And I wanted to understand the process of how that impacts how I was communicating, but then extending it to other groups and trying to see similarities and some differences about how people negotiate that kind of outsider status. But for me, it was race and class as I entered my PhD program. I never sought out to create a theory. And people always ask me, how do you create a theory? Can you tell me how you started? Well, it just happened kind of organically. I was really interested in getting at the essence of the phenomena of what it means to be different. So phenomenology is a study of phenomena, looking at the essential characteristics of that. And I first started studying African American men, and then I saw some linkages between other types of groups. So for me, phenomenology has allowed me to study people's stories, people's perceptions of their own lived experiences, hopefully in kind of real time. And the insight that I was able to get from that, the rich narratives, allowed me then to understand a particular experience in a larger context that oftentimes quantitative research did not allow me to do.
So in thinking about these different choices, if we just talk about communication approaches and preferred outcomes, there's a menu, if you will, of 9 options that people could pursue. How strategic is that choice? Is that something that people think, oh, I really need to kind of figure out purposefully what I'm going to do? Or is it more in the moment? They just kind of react and enact one of those approaches?
So I'll answer your question, boy. What my normal response is yes. So it's both and. I think that part of the basic premise of the theory is that if you are in a marginalized position, you are much more aware and conscious of the outcomes and the effects of your communication. It has to be strategic when you're in a position where you are in a less powerful hierarchical relationship. I think over time, then it might become second nature, where you're not explicitly, consciously thinking about what you're going to do, but it is always grounded in some choices that were part of your earlier lived experience. Sure. And I think in different situations, so you have those 9 communication orientations. In different situations, I might have one primary orientation, but I will be adaptive depending on the situational context, which is one of the factors.
Okay.
So I think initially when you find yourself in a position that you haven't been in before, and you're one of a few, let's say in a room, one of the few women, one of the few people who identify as LGBT, Muslim, etc., you're very conscious. And I think over time, the more experiences that you have in that context, you're probably less conscious, but it's grounded in that field of experience that's become normalized.
I'd like to talk for a minute about field of experience. What do you mean when you talk about field of experience, and how does that shape how co-cultural group members communicate?
Yeah, field of experience is interesting to talk about. I have great difficulty talking about it without using the words field and experience. So it's kind of like the sum of your life. It can be, how you were raised, where you were raised, your schooling. Every experience you have contributes to a larger kind of field of experience or a larger set of life circumstances that informs how you communicate in this day right now. So I often tell students, think about it as your life experiences as the baggage you bring. And we all need certain things. Sometimes we need to leave certain things in the past and we still drag them along. But we have these sets of experiences that inform how we're communicating today. And for me, what's important about field of experiences is knowing that not every co-cultural group member from the same group, let's say African Americans, has the same field of experience. So at my university, we have a number of students who come from inner city Detroit who were raised in predominantly African American neighborhoods, went to predominantly black schools, We also have African American students who come from the Upper Peninsula or rural areas. But sometimes on campus, our faculty and staff sees all black students as the same. That's a very different set of experience where I have an African American student who was the only African American person in their family, they were adopted, and they lived in an all-white town. Their experiences navigating as a co-cultural group member, Western Michigan University, is going to be different than someone who comes from Detroit or is from Benton Harbor or another predominantly black area. So we have to know that field of experiences is really important in understanding how people communicate.
That makes sense. So I'm curious too about effectiveness of these different approaches that you've outlined. So you've certainly, I think the theory does a great job of saying, hey, these are the options that people often use when they're trying to make their voice heard, or perhaps not make their voice heard as they communicate with the dominant group. But do any of those strategies tend to be more effective than others, particularly if people are wanting to have their views taken seriously as a member of a marginalized group?
Yes, so one of the important things, and I've had some pushback on this. One of the important things is I don't view any particular strategy or any particular orientation as ideal, as most effective. Right. Because it does matter on their lived experience. It matters on what they want to get out of it. It matters on situational context. So in some context, any strategy could be the most appropriate, because there are times where I assimilate. There are times where I want accommodation. And there are times where separation is my ultimate goal. The key is choosing those practices and enacting them in order that you can meet your larger goal. And those goals might change over time. So I don't think there are any particular ways in which we can say, okay, this strategy is most effective for this outcome. It really depends on the context.
So you talk about ability as one factor that influences how co-cultural group members seek their preferred outcomes. What are the specific communication abilities or competencies that can help somebody pursue the preferred outcomes that they're seeking?
Yes, it was interesting because that was a factor, that's probably the least discussed factor of the 6 factors. And I think I included it. It was important to include given the lived experiences of the individuals who contributed to the theory. I wanted to make sure that people understood that not everyone should assume that everyone has equal abilities. Think about communication approach. So I was raised in the upper Northeast. I do not have any problems enacting my abilities to be assertive and aggressive. And when I moved to the Midwest, what I thought was assertiveness was viewed as aggressiveness because of the cultural norms. I was described as abrupt, confrontational, rude, and I'm thinking back home, this is polite, Mark, or mock is what I was known at home. So I had to work on my ability to enact a non-assertive approach.